and they will believe it's important key whether the President Trump's intervention success or not.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nagao, for your comments there. And with that, viewers, we move on. In Tunisia, thousands of people took to the streets for a third straight week, protesting what they call President Kais Saied's expanding crackdown and critics on critics and political opponents. Demonstrators accuse him of using the police and judiciary to silence dissent and tighten one-man rule. He denies acting like a dictator or targeting opponents, however. This latest wave of anger comes after an appeals court handed jail terms of up to 45 years to dozens of opposition figures, business leaders and lawyers accused of plotting to overthrow the president. Said dissolved parliament and began ruling by decree in 2021, saying he aimed to fight corruption. But the opposition insists it was a coup that derailed Tunisia's young democracy. Let's in fact listen into what some of the protesters are saying.
Le 25 juillet 2021, depuis le coup d'État, les choses ont complètement changé. On a vu nos libertés petit à petit être retirées, alors qu'on a quand même fait la révolution. Après, les arrestations ont commencé en février 2023. Mon oncle a été arrêté à Shebeen le 22 février. Et depuis, c'est la descente aux enfers. Mais c'est la première fois depuis quelques semaines qu'on sent un changement. Le citoyen commence à en avoir marre.
أطراف سياسية كانت متنافرة وكان حتى الميدان ما يجمعهاش، على الأقل إذا ما اجتمعتش على برنامج ولا رؤية مشتركة على الأقل يجمعها النضال الميداني دفاعا عن حقوق الحريات ومطالبة بإخلاء سجون المعتقلين السياسيين.
And I now request Mr. Nagao to join us back into the discussion here. Mr. Nagao, would you agree that Tunisia is indeed descending into chaos?
It is a little bit controversial also which one will happen, but at the same time, this is a place of the Arab Spring in the 2010 to 2012. The starting point Arab Spring has started from Tunisia, so that's why this is origin. But at the same time, when we remember what happened in Tunisia at that time is the governmental police cracking down just some shop owners just a little bit too strong. So that's why it has started. It was a trigger of the demonstration against the government. So view from this, currently, if the government choose the same thing to cracking down the people against government, in this case, of course, the same things could happen. So that's why in this case, the government should not repeat the same thing. So protesters itself is a very important part of the democracy, and Tunisia should be the democracy. Even if there is a corruption, Tunisia is relatively succeeded just after the Arab Spring, that's true. So currently, still the people are complaining about the corruption or other issue related to its ancient regime. Ancient regime itself do not improve, even if that same problem has happened in the new government. That is very important. So, but at the same time, once Tunisia becoming the democratic country, maybe they should maintain is the most important thing indeed. But that is maybe I think.
But how likely is it that an authoritarian regime would be taking over and democracy that was hard sought after 2021 is in danger once again?
Yeah, that is a problem in Tunisia. So people lost something they got through the Arab Spring. That is true, but at the same time, compare with other countries, the situation is relatively better. People believe because in case of the Libya, in case of the Syria, in case of Egypt is relatively better, but many Arab Spring-related countries face something to failed state situation. So that's why, compared with these countries, the Tunisian situation is relatively better. So this is indeed the Tunisian people can proud of it. So that's why maintaining some relatively better situation is a very good thing. So that's why I wish there were many people in the international community wish Tunisia to maintain relatively stable situation.
All right, dissent indeed remains important in a democracy, but President Kais Saied now acting as an authoritarian is what the protesters are saying. Thank you for your opinion on that, Mr. Nagao. I'd let you go and we move on yours. 2 weeks after one of Nigeria's worst school kidnappings, the parents of more than 250 children abducted from St. Mary's Catholic School in Niger State remain desperate for answers. Daniel Atori, the spokesman for the Christian Association of Nigeria, visited the families and described their anguish, saying the parents are downcast, hopeful and prayerful. Despite reassurances from the government, including President Tinubu's security emergency declaration, the kidnappers' identities remain unknown and no ransom has been demanded. Parents are frustrated by the slow response from the authorities and fear for their children's safety. Activists warn that unless immediate action is taken, the violence and instability will continue to threaten the future of Nigerian children. Let's listen in.
I can feel the pains of these parents. I went to Papiri. I can imagine how it is. I mean, the atmosphere there is not that any parent, any sane and right-thinking person would, want to happen to him or her. The parents are downcast. They are sad. They are just hopeful and prayerful.
Moving on, tension is rising between China and Japan as a Chinese Navy spokesperson said a Japanese self-defense force aircraft repeatedly approached and disrupted the Chinese training mission. Beijing insists Japan's claims are not consistent with the facts, but earlier Japan's defense minister said Chinese fighter jets locked fire control radar on Japanese aircraft near the Okinawa island in 2 separate incidents. Tokyo has condemned the action as dangerous as both sides trade sharp accusations over the encounters. Moving on, Russia's defense ministry reports that its air defenses shot down 77 Ukrainian drones overnight, including attacks over 7 regions in southern and central Russia and annexed Crimea. A power transmission tower in the Rostov region was damaged, leaving 250 people without electricity. Kyiv's increased drone strikes target oil depots and military assets inside Russia in response to Moscow's missile and drone attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, on Monday, Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, will join leaders in London for high-level talks on the Ukraine conflict. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will attend, aiming to discuss the next steps for peace negotiations. And moving on to some news from Argentina. It has received its first 6 F-16 fighter jets purchased from Denmark, marking the start of a major modernization of the country's air force. President Javier Milei described the aircraft as guardian angels that will significantly strengthen Argentina's military capabilities. The U.S. fighter jets are part of a total purchase of 24 supersonic fighters for roughly $300 million, replacing Argentina's retired French Mirage jets, which had served for 4 decades. The delivery is the first of 4 batches, with 6 more aircraft expected each December through 2028. Milei joined his sister Karina Milei and Defense Minister Louis Petri for a ceremony at Rio Cuarto Air Base, highlighting the symbolic importance of the jets to Argentines. The U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires called the acquisition a major step in modernizing Argentina's air capabilities and strengthening defense cooperation with the United States, a key ally of Milei's government. Listen in to what the Argentine president said.
Con esta importante inversión en armamento militar, vamos a robustecer sustancialmente nuestra Fuerza Aérea. Nuestros pilotos hicieron una demostración impresionante de sus capacidades. En el lapso de tiempo que yo pasé volando de Buenos Aires hacia Río Cuarto, Los pilotos salieron de Río Cuarto, sobrevolaron la Casa Rosada y Plaza de Mayo y retornaron para encontrarnos aquí en nuestro aterrizaje. Hoy, cientos de miles de argentinos pudieron levantar la mirada y ver por primera vez a sus ángeles protectores surcando el cielo. Los F-16 son los nuevos custodios del espacio aéreo argentino.
Now moving on, viewers, the United States has approved a potential sale of medium tactical vehicles and related equipment to Lebanon, a deal valued at $90.5 million with Oshkosh Defense as the principal contractor. The sale includes M108-5A2 and M107-8A2 vehicles intended to strengthen Lebanon's official security forces. The timing comes amid intense domestic pressure in Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, which retains a heavy arsenal and has firmly rejected government demands to surrender its weapons. Israel has warned that failure to disarm Hezbollah could trigger renewed military action in southern Lebanon. While the U.S. sale aims to bolster Lebanon's state institution, it lands in a politically sensitive environment. Analysts warn the transfer could exacerbate tension between state forces and Hezbollah, highlighting the challenge of consolidating security and stability in the country. This move underscores the delicate balancing act facing Lebanon's government, strengthening official forces while managing a powerful non-state actor that continues to wield significant influence. And the U.S. President Donald Trump has presented the 2025 Kennedy Center honorees with their medals during a ceremony at the Oval Office. Hailing the slate of artists he was deeply involved in choosing as what he called the most accomplished and renowned class ever assembled. This year's recipients are actor Sylvester Stallone, singers Gloria Gaynor and George Strait, the band Kiss, and actor-singer Michael Crawford. Trump did not attend events at the Kennedy Center during his first term, but has now taken a keen interest in it during his second, vowing to overhaul an institution he and his supporters view as too liberal. Let's take a look.
An indelible mark on American life, and together you have defined entire genres and set new standards for the performing arts. You have set new standards. On behalf of every American who has been inspired by the unbelievable talent of Michael Crawford, who has been influenced by the music of George Strait or Gloria Gaynor or Kiss, or who has been moved by Sylvester Stallone's unmatched heart and talent and grit, because nobody played that role, and nobody will ever play that role like Sly. We want to thank you all.
And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The Venezuelan army has inducted 5,600 new soldiers as the United States increases military pressure on the oil-producing country. According to official figures, Venezuela has 200,000 troops and an additional 200,000 police officers. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who visited Israel for his first visit since taking office, reaffirmed Berlin's support after traditional solid ties between the countries were shaken by the Gaza war. A fire at a nightclub in the West Indian state of Goa has killed at least 25 people. Several tourists were among the dead in the blaze, which broke out at around midnight in a club in Arpura in North Goa district. Japan's defense minister says Chinese fighter jets directed fire control radar at Japanese military aircraft near Japan's Okinawa Islands in two incidents, condemning the move as dangerous. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth doubled down on his defense of U.S. military strikes on alleged drug cartel boats in the Caribbean, arguing President Donald Trump has the power to take military action as he sees fit and dismissing concerns that the strikes violate international law. President Javier Milei has hailed the arrival of Argentina's first 6 F-16 jets purchased from Denmark, describing them as guardian angels that will strengthen the South American country's armed forces. Hong Kong holds elections for the Legislative Council, in which only candidates vetted as patriots by the China-backed Hong Kong government may run. Security was tight in the northern district of Tai Po, close to the border with mainland China, where the fire engulfed 7 towers. Australia activates disaster relief for residents impacted by wildfires that have burned properties, infrastructure, and thousands of hectares of bushland in the country's most populous state. More than 60 wildfires were burning in New South Wales. And viewers, let's move on to the top focus story here at NewsX World's World Report. Now, this is on the Ukraine-Russia war and the peace discussions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is now saying that he's had a long and substantive call with US President Donald Trump and his special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Zelensky says Ukraine is committed to working in good faith with the United States to advance a genuine path to peace. The call follows 2 days of meetings in Miami between Witkoff, Kushner, and Ukraine's senior negotiator Rustem Umerov. Talks both sides described as constructive and focused on building a durable and just peace. Witkoff is expected to brief Ukraine on his recent meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky says he'll receive full support from Umerov in Kyiv, stressing that some matters can't be handled over the phone. He emphasized that every proposal must be practical, aimed at real peace, security, and the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. And now joining us for discussions here is retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here at NewsX World this morning. Now, talks have been going on for quite some time as far as the peace plan is concerned. Fresh rounds of talks held between Ukrainian officials, Umerov, and US's Witkoff and Jared Kushner. But a larger question now arises on Trump's diplomacy. Are they, are the efforts that the US president seems to be making having any dividends? Because so far there has not really been any progress apart from a few parties saying that talks were productive, but no real end or the proposal of a possible ceasefire.
Thank you, Kriti. A very valid question under the circumstances. I personally, when I analyze this whole issue, I don't think Trump's diplomacy is working much. But what is happening is you have to understand that and why it may work. Today, Zelensky has been cornered on the political front, on the diplomatic, as well as on the military front. And if you And each aspect I'll just elaborate briefly. On the military aspect, there is a major offensive which is already on every day. There is an escalation in this war from the Russian side. And what Russia is doing is that Russia is targeting the energy and the power centers because of the winter situation. You remember that Odessa was attacked 2 days back. In almost 5.8 lakh people are without electricity today. So this pressure is building up on Zelensky. And yesterday also, or today morning also, I was reading the news that a fresh offensive has been launched by the Russian forces. So Russia is trying to put pressure on Zelensky to accept the Trump peace plan. That is point number one. Point number two is on the political side, within his own party, Zelensky is facing a problem, and he is being pressurized also now to come on the table and to talk about peace, because Ukraine, if you look at the situation within Ukraine, the people are quite frustrated, fed up with this war. The morale of the Ukrainian army has already gone down, and the will to fight is not existing. And that is why, in such a short time, the Russian offensive is gaining ground. And the third point is on the diplomatic front. On the diplomatic front, though European Union and some European countries like France, Germany, and these countries are pressurizing Zelensky to continue this war. So I don't think this pressure of the European Union is going to work much, because Trump is focused on a different strategy and the European Union is focused on a different strategy, and they are not in sync with each other. So what I feel is that ultimately this strategy of Trump will work. And why I'm actually saying it is because before Putin came to India, he had a long meeting with Steve Witkoff, and I think it went in a very, very positive manner. The second aspect is that when Putin came to India with the Prime Minister Modi also, there were long discussions to end this war. So what I see the situation as it is developing now is that Putin is quite okay for a ceasefire as long as his terms and conditions are met. And he has made it very, very clear in his interview to India today also that what he actually wants and the end state of this war. And I think that more or less the US is also a part of that peace plan. And what Putin is wanting the end state, it is more or less there in the Trump's peace plan. So I would think that right now the ball is in the court of Zelensky, because he has to now take a call whether he wants a ceasefire or not. And he is under tremendous pressure now to accept this ceasefire.
Right. Only if the European Union was doing the same for Zelensky, but that unfortunately is not happening, as Kyiv is also launching counter-strikes on Russia and its power facilities and even energy portals. Do stay on with us, Dr. Kocher. There's some more information coming in and I'd like your opinion on that. But let's tell our viewers first that the Kremlin has welcomed a major shift in the United States national security strategy under President Donald Trump. The updated document no longer labels Russia as a direct threat, a change Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov calls a positive step. Now, Peskov says that the messages coming from the Trump administration stand in clear contrast to the approach of previous US governments. He added that Moscow intends to closely review and analyze the full strategy in detail. The revised US strategy also calls for cooperation with Russia on the issue of strategic stability, a signal the Kremlin views as encouraging. Peskov emphasized that Russia will study the document carefully as it evaluates what the shift means for future US-Russia relations. And I'd now request a comment from Dr. Kocher here once again. Dr. Kocher, a welcome step from US for Russia after the massive sanctions threat, now a change in stance. But what do you think is driving this new strategy?
So this new strategy is basically, if you have been observing the kind of statements Trump has been giving right during his election campaign, when he criticized the Biden administration of starting this Ukraine war.
Right.
And when he said that, in case I was there, I wouldn't have done this kind of a thing. So he is now realized that there is no point in locking horns with Russia, because ultimately, what is the end state one actually looks at? Because when you make a strategy, any kind of strategy, you are looking at the end state. And when that end state does not suggest to you to have Russia as a potential enemy, because Trump has got many things on his card. China is one thing. I've not gone a great detail into this strategy so far, and I would like to explore that what kind of approach America wants to have towards China. But definitely, if we are talking of Russia as of now, Trump does not want to see Russia as an adversary. He wants to work with Russia, and if you remember in his Trump 1.0, he had a very good working relation with the Russians. So I think that is the background of this entire thing, because the US has realized that it can't have too many superpowers as his enemies, and moreover, he is worried about the alliances which Russia can have with Iran and North Korea and China in the neighborhood. He doesn't want these alliances also to get strong or to be in a position to confront America. So I think it's a very, very a subtle way of bringing out a national security strategy. Because remember, any national security strategy, when you bring it out, it takes into account your threat perception. And when you feel that Russia is not a threat and can be managed in a peaceful manner, then you formulate this strategy. And the kind of talks I have been seeing, or the kind of relationship, body language between Putin and Trump suggests that there is a move now from the US side for reconciliation with Russia and develop better relations with Russia.
Sure. Well, thank you for now, Dr. Kocher, for sharing your perspective with us. And with that, viewers, we move on. And there's some news, tragic news coming in from India. A devastating fire took place at a nightclub in India's Goa, and it has killed 23 people, including several tourists. The blaze broke out just after midnight at the Birch nightclub in Arpura in North Goa. Chief Minister Pramod Sawant has described the incident as a very painful day for the state, saying 3 people died from burn injuries while the rest succumbed to suffocation. He confirmed the club had been operating without proper permission, a failure he says directly contributed to the tragedy. Sawant has ordered a full inquiry and promised strict action against anyone found responsible. Video from the scene shows rescuers carrying victims down a narrow staircase as police and paramedics worked through the night. Fires of this scale are far too common across India, often linked to lax safety standards. Officials say a cylinder blast is suspected, but investigators are examining the site to determine the exact cause. Now, moving on to some news from China. In a rising crisis over regional security, Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles has voiced concern today after Japan reported 2 serious encounters with Chinese fighter jets near Okinawa. The jets reportedly logged their fire control radar at Japanese military aircraft, a highly provocative act that signals a potential attack. Japanese Defense Minister Koizumi vowed that Japan would respond resolutely and calmly to safeguard peace. These incidents occurring near disputed territories mark a significant escalation in tension between the two nations. The situation is further complicated by Japan's warnings to China that any aggression against Taiwan could prompt a military response. If Japan's security is threatened, the growing military pressure is threatening to destabilize the region. Let's listen in to what the leaders had to say.
昨日には中国軍機による自衛隊機へのレーダー照射事案が2回ありました。このような行動は航空機の安全な飛行に必要な範囲を超える危険な行為であり、中国側には強く抗議し、再発防止を厳重に申し入れたところです。
Both the Defence Forces of Japan and Australia are engaged in the work of asserting the global rules-based order, which is fundamentally important for the peace and security of the Indo-Pacific and for the maintenance of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The events last night are concerning, and Australia has also experienced concerning events in interactions with the PLA.
And now joining us in this discussion is Dr. Astha Chadda, who's an Associate Professor of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University in Kyoto in Japan. Thank you, first of all, Dr. Chadda, for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, of course, it was rather important for China and Australia to Japan and Australia to come together to counter the Chinese aggressions, particularly after the incidents that we've just reported. How do you think this triangular relation is going to pan out?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I mean, here in Japan, the administration is very clear on two things. One, that they need to bolster their ties with like-minded democratic nations in the Indo-Pacific, because any conflict or any threat, rise of threat in the area would be detrimental to supply chains, would be detrimental to trade, would be detrimental to freedom of navigation for all countries and not just Japan. So that's one. And two, Japan is very clear in terms of its newly gained stance, or let's say newly vocal stance that it has adopted under Prime Minister Takaichi, stating that they will not tolerate any acts of aggression, though they will not retaliate, against those militarily, but they will maintain calm. However, they are going to bolster their military capabilities, and this is exactly what we saw with the Japan-Australia meeting, because again, it had twofold objectives. One was the fact that Australian Navy particularly is planning to acquire an upgraded version of Japanese Mogami-class frigate. This marks one of the biggest, sales in defense equipment that Japan is going to do after 2014 upliftment of the bans on its own military export. But also, these two nations coming together emphasizes the fact that both of them have a very similar threat perception with regards to China's actions or coercive behavior in the East China Sea or in the wider Pacific. And the fact that this time, Chinese military aircraft had logged radar onto the Japanese SDF fighter jets. This is one of those things which Japan, I think, in some way was anticipating, because earlier, a few days ago, Taiwan had, in some way warned Japan and the like-minded partners in the Indo-Pacific, stating that Chinese are trying to do this, this mock drills of some sort towards any of the navies or any of the other parties that were passing through the East China Sea. So, this shows a continuation in the trends that have existed for a few months now, but also at the same time, they do raise the stakes for security in the Indo-Pacific.
Right, certainly. Now, Australia and Japan obviously came together earlier as well. They've signed several security agreements also for the region, especially in the face of Chinese aggression. Does China have anything to worry from them coming together?
Well, Well, I mean, there's nothing to worry per se because, I mean, China is in its capabilities quite strong. But yes, the worry here is that China would not want its trade partners or its long-standing, let's say, economic partners to isolate it in some way diplomatically over incidents that are recurring in the East China Sea or are recurring in the wider Indo-Pacific. That's one. Two, China is very sensitive with regards to any comments that are made by these countries, with specifically regarding Taiwan. And then both of these things together are ultimately going to lead to some sort of a diplomatic crisis, which we see is already the case between China and Japan, wherein their bilateral relationship has taken a hit in the recent few months. So, I mean, for China, the main issue here would be, being able to somehow ensure its partners that it's not going to continue these provocative actions, and at the same time maintaining its relationship with not just Japan and Australia, but also with the ASEAN countries. It has to rebuild that trusted relationship with countries like Philippines and Vietnam and Japan and Australia to ensure that, the other countries should actually see China as a rising power that is peaceful and not as one that is threatening to the region's security.
Right. Now, Takaichi has already reached out to US on the Taiwan question. Of course, Japan, US and Australia have held drills together. They've come together on security matters. Now, do you think Australia is also going to join US or rather Japan, in its support for Taiwan?
I mean, Australia has had a very clear, I would say, stance with regard to Taiwan as far as this is concerned. I mean, most of these countries, the ones that you named, they all maintain, they show their allegiance they show their support to the idea of one China principle, right? So the idea is they do recognize China as the main government and not Taiwan as a representative or as the alternative to the China that we know. Given that they are very sensitive, the three of them, with regard to any military action around Taiwan or any force or any coercive actions by China around Taiwan. So even though Australia might not have expressed it as clearly as China and US have, but they do maintain, the three of them do maintain a high levels of both interoperability with regards to their military. They do maintain high degree of operational coordination in the Indo-Pacific. They also maintain a very good sort of a framework, trilateral sort of framework, which includes, which could be in Quad or which could be them collectively pushing for, regional stability. So, I mean, given that participation of Australia in these multilateral or trilateral frameworks, one could assume that the fact that Australia is also trying to, in some way, build on its maritime capabilities, build on its military capabilities, Australia is making sure that as an oceanic power, it too has certain influence that it can project in the region and does not really, stay shy or appear to be weaker in the face of China, which is clearly here, is seen as an aggressive party. And, besides that, we must also understand that Australia has over the time built its stance. So China and Australia remain interlocked in a very interdependent sort of a trade relationship. And for Australia to de-risk it in some way would require some time. But meanwhile, it being on a path to build its maritime security capabilities shows that it is pretty much on the same page with regards to its Indo-Pacific partners like the US and Japan.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Chadha, for speaking to us and for sharing your perspective. And with that, viewers, we are now going to move on to some news from Australia, where wildfires in New South Wales have burnt through thousands of hectares of bushland, now prompting the authorities to urge evacuation at the highest danger rating for thousands of residents in the nation's most populous state. More than 70 bushfires were burning across the state, including a blaze in the state's Upper Hunter area, also at the highest emergency rating, which had burned through almost 10,000 hectares. Authorities have warned of a high-risk bushfire season this Australian summer after several quiet seasons. The Black Summer fires of 2019-2020 destroyed an area the size of Turkey and killed 33 people. Residents have said that they have lost everything amid the wildfires? Listen in.
He had no time to even think, and luckily I've got a motorhome, we got that out, so we've got somewhere in the interim to stay, and got two of our cars still stuck over there. We'll try and retrieve them later. And, we'll start again. We've lost everything. All we've got left is what we're wearing, And
now moving on, hundreds of Israelis held two separate protests in Tel Aviv on Saturday, each targeting a different controversy involving Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. The first demonstration focused on the events of October 7, with protesters demanding the appointment of an independent state inquiry. They accused the government of avoiding accountability and object to Netanyahu selecting committee members, saying it would undermine the investigation's integrity. A second crowd gathered nearby to protest Netanyahu's announcement that he has submitted a request for a pardon to end his long-running corruption trial. Netanyahu insists the cases are politically driven, but demonstrators say the move further erodes public trust. Both protests unfolded against the backdrop of the war that began after Hamas-led militants killed 1,200 people and took 251 hostages on October 7, and Israel's offensive in Gaza has since killed more than 69,700 Palestinians, most of them civilians. Let's listen in to what some of the protesters have said.
Our Prime Minister is charged with very severe crimes. He's trying to flee from court. And in order to do that, he is asked also for a pardon. That is absolutely insane, because you can be pardoned if you don't plead guilty.
We are here is because we are starting to hear talks about a pardon to Netanyahu. President Trump had talked about it. President Herzog received a letter from Netanyahu and did dismiss it offhand, as he should have been.
What we're doing tonight is protesting against the current actions of the government, mainly not to the decision not to have an investigation committee to investigate the aftermath of October 7th, and the fact that this government refuses to draft ultra-Orthodox Haredi men to the army, while there is an acute need of 12,000 soldiers right now.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. A drone attack by the Sudanese paramilitary forces hit a kindergarten in south-central Sudan, killing 50 people, including 33 children. Tragedy comes as the RSF continue its violent assault throughout the region, now concentrating in the oil-rich Kordofan states. Qatar's Prime Minister warns that Gaza ceasefire is at a critical moment and could unravel without rapid movement toward a permanent solution. On the ground, the reported Israeli air raids have hit Maghazi camp in central Gaza, with the IDF killing seven residents in the north. Hamas says it's ready to hand over arms to a Palestinian Authority on the condition of the end of Israeli occupation. The group says that their weapons are linked to the existence of occupation and would accept the deployment of UN forces as a separation force. Russian forces launch an overnight combined airstrike on infrastructure in the central city of Kremenchuk, causing power and water outages as winter approaches. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says that it downed 77 Ukrainian drones overnight as both sides continue cross-border air attacks. Outgoing U.S. envoy to Ukraine says a deal to end the Ukraine war is really close, and remaining issues include Ukraine's Donbas region and one of Ukraine's main nuclear plants. He also claims that both sides have suffered 2 million casualties during the 4-year war. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says he fully supports the second strike on a suspected drug board in the Caribbean and insists he would have made the same decision. Reports say an admiral ordered the follow-up strike to kill 2 survivors, while Hegseth declined to say whether the classified video will be released. Indian authorities order an investigation and offer compensation to victims after a fire killed 25 in Goa state. A fire ripped through a nightclub on Sunday, after which Prime Minister Modi offered condolences. Hong Kong citizens go to the polls in an election where the focus is on turnout, with residents grieving after a deadly fire traumatized the city. Authorities are scrambling to avoid a broader public backlash after the city's deadliest fire in nearly 8 years. And viewers, now the top focus again on the Ukraine-Russia war. In Ukraine, the central city of Kremenchuk was hit by a combined overnight airstrike, knocking out power and water across several districts. The mayor says Russian drones and missiles targeted key infrastructure, triggering fires and major damage. Kremenchuk, an industrial hub on the Dnipro River and home to one of Ukraine's largest oil refineries, has been repeatedly attacked. City crews are working to restore electricity, water and heating while officials assess the full impact. Ukraine's Air Force issued multiple warnings overnight as the Russian forces intensified long-range strikes ahead of winter, aiming to pressure civilians and disrupt industry. This strike now as U.S. peace talks wrap up. The central Ukrainian city of Kremenchuk has been struck, and it's in fact strategically located between Kyiv and the eastern front lines. It was subjected to a massive combined strike on civilian infrastructure. Russia launched a fresh wave of aerial strikes in overnight assault on Saturday, and Kremenchuk, which happens to be a major industrial hub, is the latest to be targeted. The mayor has confirmed the repeated attacks, noting that water, electricity and heat services have been disrupted, but no casualties have fortunately been reported. Problem continues. The fighting isn't slowing down even as top-level diplomacy ramps up. Cross-border strikes continue to take place in Ukraine and Russia as well. In the latest, Russia has launched a fresh wave of aerial attacks on Ukraine, hitting major industrial hub just hours after Zelensky concluded negotiations with Trump's negotiating team in Miami and said the talks were very constructive. The fresh wave of attacks has in fact stalled peace efforts. Russia now targets infrastructure in Kremenchuk, power and water supplies disrupted. All right, now joining me in the discussion here is retired Major General Sudhakarji, international relations and defense expert. Joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, retired Major General Sudhakarji, once again for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, peace talks wrap up and then boom, there's a massive strike. Should Donald Trump concede that his negotiations are failing so far?
For getting me for your show. In matters related to ongoing conflict for more than 3.5 years, with such a complex situation to navigate. Yes, you have a point in the question, and he should think it over. And there are no quick solutions. All that I would say in defense of this peace proposal is, at least somebody is thinking in terms of bringing back some kind of normalcy and peace to this mindless conflict. But having said that, we need to identify as to there is a clear indication. Despite all proposals being mooted out, the sincerity of purpose, the selfless commitment at the highest level, at the level of Donald Trump, There is something this outbreak of intense shelling and massive attack is telling Donald Trump and his team to take cognizance of. What is it? All I'm saying is that be pragmatic. What is pragmatism in kind of ongoing conflict? Pragmatism lies in giving priority to the first issue. The first issue, to the best of my mind, being a ex-military man, is that this mindless shelling and massive attack must come to a freeze. Only then you can make some movement or headway towards the peace. You see, in Alaska, Putin did convey a point that you have the larger peace plan, but to have a larger end state, he's talking about the end state. But to reach up to the end state, you have to means and methods in place. And means and methods would start with a ceasefire. If you don't start with a ceasefire, what I mean is, wherever one is, relevant stakeholders, all the barrels should freeze. They should be mothballed. And when I say mothball, means mothball. Wherever one is, there should be total seizure of the firing. Thereafter, it should fall back a couple of kilometers away from a particular line or point of contact. And it should be monitored and seen by a neutral force. That neutral force in Central Europe is also a very sensitive issue. People in the Europe, they want to send their troops, boots on ground, which is not going to be neutral and not going to be accepted by Putin. So therefore, one has to go into the deeper issues. The broad parameters are okay. It is moving in a direction of peace, all right. But it should be divided into short-term, medium-term goals and long-term goals. It's not going to come to an end in just about 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. It's going to be it's a very long game. Donald Trump will do good to actually be practical in his wisdom and think ahead that it's not going to come to an end abruptly. It has lasted for 4.5 years. Rather, I would say it started way back in 2014, if not earlier than that. From 2014 till now, 11 long years, the conflict in multiple forms, hybrid, irregular kind of a form has been going on. The kinetic form actually started taking shape sometime in February 2022. And that's how we are counting at 3.5 years. So therefore, hold horse, go in for a long game. I'm sure, and pragmatic means I'm sure things will hold out in favor of peace.
We hope so too. And the strikes for now to at least come to a halt temporarily. Talks are productive, but action clearly not. Thank you for your comment there, retired Major General Sudhakarji. Do stay on as I request your opinion on another news coming forward. For now, viewers, let's talk about the Indigo crisis that's stretched to its 6th day. The airline has cancelled at least 112 flights at the Mumbai airport and about 109 flights at the Delhi airport, causing inconvenience to thousands of passengers nationwide. In the last few days too, we have reported hundreds of flight cancellations and delays, which seriously disrupt air traffic across India. Meanwhile, Indigo CEO Peter Elbers and COO Aistro has received show cause notices from DGCA yesterday, which demanded clear explanations from them within 24 hours on the ongoing flight disruptions. The notices also mentioned that the primary cause of the flight disturbance was that the airline had failed to secure proper arrangements in place that should have been done to smoothly implement the approved FTDL scheme for the airline. They further stressed on its significant lapses in planning, oversight and resource management. According to a formal statement given by Indigo, the airline said that they strategically operated only 700 flights on Friday so as to initiate a reboot in their system, which could allow them to start afresh yesterday with higher number of flights and better stability. It added that it operated 1,500 flights yesterday. Moreover, the Civil Aviation Ministry also issued various measures which include capping on airfares and passing strict direction to the Indigo airline to ensure complete ticket refund for cancelled or delayed flights to all passengers. The ministry has also said that all refunds should be completed by today, 8 p.m. India time. Sources say that there is some sign of improvement, but it will still take significant time for Indigo to normalize its flight operations across India. And my colleague Belly Thomas will shortly join us to give us more inputs on this. But the Indigo crisis continues as over 500 flights have been cancelled even today. Official figures state that 220 flights have been cancelled. And my colleague Belly Thomas now joins us live. Belly, thanks for joining us. Do share with us the current situation at the airport there. How are the passengers doing and how are they being serviced?
Kriti, the situation has, has come down when compared to the previous 2 days, wherein passengers had a lot of inconvenience with regards to the flight schedules at the Bengaluru International Airport. So far, since yesterday, if you see, around 130 flights have been cancelled, 63 arrivals and 61 departures. With this, a lot of passengers who have been, waiting there, they wouldn't want refund because the airfares at the other airlines are, very expensive. So they wouldn't want a refund, but they would want for a reschedule. And they were seen waiting at the airports. Even some of them spending throughout the night, sleeping on the floors of the airport, inside departure gates and outside as well with their luggages. So there, besides this, there was also a lot of issues with the baggage system, where baggage collection, wherein people who had checked in had gotten their luggage stuck there, and ever since on the display, on the information display board, it would say their flights have been delayed. But after they had checked in their check-in baggages, later on, after 2-3 hours, it would say the flight is cancelled. And after that, to get back their check-in baggage so that they can wait for one more day. So that's not like possible for them, because all their essentials such as dresses and money is stuck inside and indeed documents also are stuck inside those baggages. And people who are arriving to the Bengaluru airport also through connecting flights also have had their baggages stuck with the airlines, who couldn't reach out to the passengers to say that. So this was a major complaint that, but since yesterday, when you compare the inconveniences, the magnitude of inconveniences or the intensity of inconveniences, it has come down to a lot today. With people are kind of, they kind of savage. They got to know that this is going to happen, and they were somehow kind of digesting all these things, and they don't have any other choice other than to just wait and until their baggages come and until their flights are scheduled according to the airlines. Decisions.
Yeah, yesterday, Belly, there was also an update that those who had booked and were not able to take the flights would be refunded. If you've been able to speak to any of the passengers there, have they shared any information on that regard, if the refunds have actually been processed? Because I'm sure that's going to be a key concern to all the passengers who've booked their flights and have had them cancelled.
Kriti, I spoke to a lot of passengers there at the airport, wherein a majority of them said that they wouldn't go for a refund because the refund it was not a full refund. Some of them claimed that, the company has offered us to say, give the full refund along with coupons, which were gift coupons. But a lot of them said, you shouldn't be believing these words at this point of time. And that was the scenario. It was utter chaos and confusion out there when the airlines were sending message that your total ticket amount would be refunded. But majority of the passengers whom I spoke to were interested in actually rescheduling the flights because they were either for a pleasure trip or kind of a scheduled visit, not emergency. A few passengers whom I met who were in emergency were like people who were who had their exams, MBA entrance examinations going on in other states, and people who were rushing for funerals. And there was also one wedding party from Hubli whom the bride's entire family and all the relatives were stuck at the airport, and the groom had to conduct the wedding in an online ceremony.
Right.
And so that was the kind of situation what we saw in Bengaluru. And there was one passenger who was carrying her dad's ashes to Haridwar for the final rites, and she couldn't. Her flight also was cancelled, and she was kind of waiting for the available next flight, which the airlines were trying to schedule for them. And there was a lot of group of passengers who had come for a pleasure visit, who were headed to Langkawi in Rajasthan. They had come from Delhi all the way to Bengaluru, and after sightseeing in Bengaluru, they were going back to Jaipur, where this kind of issue started at that point. And all these people, there were hundreds of them, all of them, 50 couples, if I have to be precise. And these people were kind of helped by the airlines, that they were ferried in a bus which was funded by the airlines, and they were put in a hotel. But these passengers, when we spoke to, they said that they were not sure as to how the facilities at the hotel would be, or they were unsure or uncertain about when their next flight would be. So the entire holiday would be memorable, but in a different way, in a negative way, is what they told us, Kriti.
Belly, it's not just the pilots. I spoke to a couple of them who said, of course, they are fatigued, but also their cab drivers who are apparently on 24-hour duties. So they are also fatigued, and that's also causing a lot of disruption. I'll have that discussion on another day. I'm running short on time, but thank you for giving that update from Bengaluru, from across India. And for now, viewers, we are going to shift our focus in Brooklyn. Hundreds of people are showing up for an anti-ICE training session as fears grow over possible immigration raids in New York. The event was organized by the Hands Off New York Coalition, which urged people to record every ICE encounter to keep agents accountable. Participants say that the training made them feel empowered, with some calling recent viral videos of ICE operations basically kidnappings. Many attendees say that they just want to protect their neighbors and their city. Organizers told the crowd that documenting raids, forming groups, and showing up in numbers can make a real difference. According to them, the goal is to channel fear and anger into community action and stand together if raids increase. Listen in.
I would like to be able to support my community. I love living in New York. I would like to continue to live in New York. I can't imagine living anywhere else, so I need to protect it. We'll see. I haven't blown a whistle in a very long time, since like gym class in high school. So I have this one. I have one for my roommate back at home.
And I think here in the city, even though a lot of us agree, a lot of us aren't sure how to act yet. It's really important to me because I feel like we can do it. And I feel like it's going to take all of us. And I would rather funnel my fear and anger and sadness into building something joyful and hopeful, and building a city and a country that we've never even dreamed of before.
And I now request the retired Major General Sudhakar Ji to join us back into the discussion here. Sudhakar Ji, now of course anti-ICE training packed in New York amid fears of clashes with the police, and interestingly there were reports of clashes and chaos erupting in Chinatown, in Manhattan. In London also there are protests over the embassy building of China. That's because of fears of surveillance and espionage. Do you think these two incidents are a coincidence, or is it something largely planned?
Kriti, Thank you for getting me back to take my views on your show. It's a very important thing that you are raising because my personal take is it is premeditated. There is a big thing, there is a bigger event than what we have seen. A bigger event, we need to understand. If you have time, just I'll make very quick reflections. Let our viewers understand what is ICE, when did it start, why is it picking up momentum now. You see, these are the moot questions. I keep taking classes for PhD students for IIT, my Army War College, and other. You see, the basics are not clear. People have to understand the ICE, although you have covered in your question and preamble. You see, this is all related to the homeland security. Today, the US is feeling insecure because there are illegal immigrations which have taken place for past several years. Donald Trump, particularly in the first term in 2018, he actually gravitated his center of gravity towards many issues. But one of the issues was this. He came down very heavily against the immigration and thus the immigration and customs enforcement. In short, it is called an ICE. It came into prominence. It was always a prominent kind of an organ, but it assumed a prominent profile after Donald Trump in 2018 started prioritizing as per his election campaign to come down against the illegal immigration heavily. And then it picked up momentum gradually. In his second term, he's come down very heavily in 2025, and there are groups like Rise and Resist. Rise and Resist is a group which is actually showcasing or demonstrating its resistance against the ICE activities by the government. Why is this resistance? This has to be because their demand basically, like they had demonstrated, if you recall, Kriti, in Statue of Liberty area, they had demonstrated, like you said, in Manhattan, it is spilled over to London. Gradually, it is spreading all over the world. But the basic message they are saying that they're demanding for the abolition and the human immigration policies, which is separating people from the families. This is the crucial issue. They say you do anything, but don't separate from the families and don't render or don't extend inhuman treatment. And second thing is, it is involving arrests for actions like trespassing at Trump Tower. Trump Towers are a number of places in many city centers. And anyone who's trespassing, knowingly or unknowingly, people who do it inadvertently, they are also being jailed and very severe actions are being taken. And worst thing which is happening is the police force, the Homeland Security is actually, you know what they have started doing? Their agents who are wearing the mask, they're going in a camouflaged manner. They don't reveal their identity. They carry out perceived, I would say, human rights violations and civil rights violations, which are actually leading to widespread criticism. It amounts to, you know, hijacking people, their abduction, judicial killings have not been reported till now, but
Sir,
there are definite abductions which are
sorry
taken.
to interrupt, but could you please wrap up quickly? I'm being told we're short on time and there's another guest waiting.
Yeah, last but not the least, all I would say is it's likely to go on. It will keep mounting pressure against the government until government gives some kind of assurance to scale down the operations which are being unleashed in a most uncivilized manner. They expect that they should be given basic human right. The people who are missing now, they should be returned to them, and the separation from the family should be minimized. And this particular act against the ICE should be abolished altogether, and the previous law existing in USA should be restored to.
Thank you, Retired Major General Sudhakarji, for your comments there, and appreciate you giving us your time. And let's quickly move on, viewers. Japan's Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi and his Australian counterpart Richard Marles have met earlier today in Tokyo and have agreed upon deepening their security cooperation amid China's increasingly aggressive actions in the East and South China Seas. At the meeting, the Japanese Defense Minister has confirmed about both nations making progress towards concluding a contract by the end of this fiscal year, that is through next March. Now, the contract revolves around Australian Navy's plan to introduce an upgraded version of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Forces Mogami-class frigate into their fleet, which is a versatile warship sailing vessel. Additionally, the Japanese defense minister has also talked about yesterday's incident where a Chinese military aircraft logged radar onto their Air SDF fighter jets, disturbing peace in the region. Let's now listen into the comments made by the defense ministers during the meeting.
中国によって行われましたレーダー照射2回、これにつきましては、このような行動は航空機の安全な飛行に必要な範囲を超える危険な行為であって、中国側には強く抗議し、再発防止を厳重に申し上げます。
Simply say that we do not want to see any change to the status quo across the Taiwan Straits. In general terms, Minister Koizumi and I spoke about the way in which Australia and Japan can work together to assert the rules-based order and provide for the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific.
And joining us now is Dr. Bonnie Yushi Liao, who is Assistant Professor of Diplomacy and International Relations at Tamkang University in Taiwan. Thank you, Professor, for joining us here at NewsX World. We really appreciate you giving us your time. I'd like to start by asking my first question to you. How do you think Australian support to Japan is going to help it counter China?
Japan and Australia are essentially running a dual-track strategy. China is still a major economic partner. Japan depends on China as a manufacturing base, and Australia continues to rely on Chinese demand for resources. So neither country can afford a clean break. At the same time, they both have experienced direct pressure from Beijing, whether it's maritime coercion around the Senkakus or punitive trade measures against Australian exports. So that's why we see them strengthening defense cooperation and building joint exercises and improving intelligence sharing, not as a move toward confrontation, but as risk insurance. So the balance looks like engagement without naivety. Both countries seek deterrence while keeping trade doors open, and they diversify supply chains so economic stability doesn't become strategic vulnerability.
Dr. Liao, do you assess that it is likely for Japan to reach out to other members of the Quad other than the United States as China is carrying out its military exercises now in the Yellow Sea?
You mean like within the broader U.S.-led security architecture?
No, within the Quad.
Oh, within the Quad. Okay. It fits as one of the central support beams. The United States remains the main security guarantor, but the architecture is becoming more multi-centered rather than hierarchical. Japan and Australia are no longer followers of U.S. strategy. They are co-creators of frameworks like the Quad, AUKUS collaboration channels, and trilateral exercises with the U.S. and some other regional partners. So in this sense, Washington does not have to carry Indo-Pacific alone. A more capable Japan and a more forward-leaning Australia distribute deterrence, share burdens, and give smaller regional states more diplomatic room. So this is not purely a U.S. system. It's becoming a networked security ecosystem with Japan and Australia acting as anchors that help sustain stability with even when the Americans' attention fluctuates. So in short, Japan and Australia are not aiming to contain China. They're building stability through shared deterrence, diversified risk, and a more networked Indo-Pacific order.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Liao, for joining us here at NewsX World. I'm running short of time, but I have taken some more from you. And with that, viewers, let's move on to developments coming in from Hong Kong, which is voting under Beijing's Patriots rules as for its latest Legislative Council election. The government has pushed hard for a higher turnout, but the effort has been overshadowed by the city's deadliest fire in decades, which has killed 159 people. Turnout by midday reached just over 10%, slightly higher than at the same point in the last poll. Chief Executive John Lee urged residents to vote, saying each ballot supports reform and those affected by the disaster. The election takes place with major pro-democracy parties absent, and newcomers including Olympic fencing champion Vivian Kong entering the race. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The Venezuelan army has inducted 5,600 new soldiers as the United States increases military pressure on the oil-producing country. According to official figures, Venezuela has 200,000 troops and an additional 200,000 police officers. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who visited Israel for his first visit since taking office, reaffirmed Berlin's support after traditional solid ties between the countries were shaken by the Gaza war. A fire at a nightclub in the West Indian state of Goa has killed at least 25 people. Several tourists were among the dead in the blaze, which broke out at around midnight in a club in Arpura in North Goa district. Japan's defense minister says Chinese fighter jets directed fire control radar at Japanese military aircraft near Japan's Okinawa Islands in two incidents, condemning the move as dangerous. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth doubled down on his defense of U.S. military strikes on alleged drug cartel boats in the Caribbean, arguing President Donald Trump has the power to take military action as he sees fit and dismissing concerns that the strikes violate international law. President Javier Milei has hailed the arrival of Argentina's first 6 F-16 jets purchased from Denmark, describing them as guardian angels that will strengthen the South American country's armed forces. Hong Kong holds elections for the Legislative Council in which only candidates vetted as patriots by the China-backed Hong Kong government may run. Security was tight in the northern district of Tai Po, close to the border with mainland China, where the fire engulfed 7 towers. Australia activates disaster relief for residents impacted by wildfires that have burnt properties, infrastructure, and thousands of hectares of bushland in the country's most populous state. More than 60 wildfires were burning in New South Wales. And viewers, let's move on to the top focus story here at NewsX World's World Report. Now, this is on the Ukraine-Russia war and the peace discussions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is now saying that he's had a long and substantive call with US President Donald Trump and his special envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Zelensky says Ukraine is committed to working in good faith with the United States to advance a genuine path to peace. The call follows 2 days of meetings in Miami between Witkoff, Kushner, and Ukraine's senior negotiator Rustem Umerov. Talks both sides described as constructive and focused on building a durable and just peace. Witkoff is expected to brief Ukraine on his recent meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky says he'll receive full support from Umerov in Kyiv, stressing that some matters can't be handled over the phone. He emphasized that every proposal must be practical, aimed at real peace, security, and the long-term reconstruction of Ukraine. And now joining us for discussions here is retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here at NewsX World this morning. Now, talks have been going on for quite some time as far as the peace plan is concerned. Fresh rounds of talks held between Ukrainian officials, Umerov, and US's Witkoff and Jared Kushner. But a larger question now arises on Trump's diplomacy. Are they, are the efforts that the US president seems to be making having any dividends? Because so far there has not really been any progress apart from a few parties saying that talks were productive, but no real end or the proposal of a possible ceasefire.
Thank you, Kriti. A very valid question under the circumstances. I personally, when I analyze this whole issue, I don't think Trump's diplomacy is working much. But what is happening is you have to understand that and why ultimately it may work. Today, Zelensky has been cornered on the political front, on the diplomatic, as well as on the military front. And if you, and each aspect I'll just elaborate briefly. On the military aspect, there is a major offensive which is already on every day. There is an escalation in this war from the Russian side. And what Russia is doing is that Russia is targeting the energy and the power centers because of the winter situation. You remember that Odessa was attacked 2 days back. In almost 5.8 lakh people are without electricity today. So this pressure is building up on Zelensky. And yesterday also, or today morning also, I was reading the news that a fresh offensive has been launched by the Russian forces. So Russia is trying to put pressure on Zelensky to accept the Trump peace plan. That is point number one. Point number two is on the political side, within his own party, Zelensky is facing a problem, and he is being pressurized also now to come on the table and to talk about the peace, because Ukraine, if you look at the situation within Ukraine, the people are quite frustrated, fed up with this war. The morale of the Ukrainian army has already gone down, and the will to fight is not existing, and that is why in such a short time the Russian offensive is gaining ground. And the third point is on the diplomatic front. On the diplomatic front, though European Union and some European countries like France, Germany, and these countries are pressurizing Zelensky to continue this war. So I don't think this pressure of the European Union is going to work much, because Trump is focused on a different strategy and the European Union is focused on a different strategy, and they are not in sync with each other. So what I feel is that ultimately this strategy of Trump will work. And why I'm actually saying it is because before Putin came to India, he had a long meeting with Steve Witkoff, and I think it went in a very, very positive manner. A second aspect is that when Putin came to India with the Prime Minister Modi also, there were long discussions to end this war. So what I see the situation as it is developing now is that Putin is quite okay for a ceasefire as long as his terms